So welcome to week 15. Tonight we're going to cover element 14. So tonight we're going to be talking about transition, because obviously our program is somewhat regimented. It's a very precise formula, and while people are in the weight loss phase, they're following this precise formula. A lot of people actually get a little bit nervous when they get to the end of that, because it's like, okay, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. This has been working for me. I've gotten to this place, and now I'm concerned that if I start making changes, what's going to happen, right? And of course, we know that the vast majority of people with any weight loss program, once they've ended it, they have a tendency to gain the weight back. As we've said from the beginning, one of the really important parts of what Dr. Anderson has done, the work that he's done in putting this program together, is putting in the different methods for changing our lifestyle, installing new habits, so that we don't just return back to the way things were when we're done with our weight loss journey. So tonight we're going to talk about, what does that transition look like? How do we work through that? Most of you in this room aren't ready for that yet. Loretta might be close, getting really close. But it's kind of nice just to kind of have a heads up down the road, so that as you approach that time, you kind of know what things to expect, what kinds of things to prepare for. So we're going to cover a bunch of that tonight. So Dr. Anderson says this: in order to continue making progress, we need to transition our body to the full range of healthier foods. It's one of the things that people oftentimes are concerned about. Why can't I eat fruits? Why can't I eat certain foods? Well, it's not that those things are bad for us, and it's not that those things are not going to be a part of our diet. They have to be a part of our diet. But for the weight loss time, we put those things off, right? But we need to transition our body to the full range of healthier foods that will allow us to eat more variety of meals, and yet choose the foods that help support our long-term health and weight. This is the part that a lot of people, during my health assessment, when I talk to people, I ask them, what's kept you from being able to lose weight in the past? Or what caused you to return the weight that you lost? And most of the time it's, I'm not sure how to eat healthy. I'm not sure how to entertain a balanced diet, a healthy diet, where I can maintain my weight loss. So that's why this transition and the things that we'll talk about tonight are so important, right? It's not knowing or not being willing to do this that got us to where we were. It's either not knowing how to eat healthy or not being willing to eat healthy that got us to the place where we needed to lose weight. So knowing how to fuel ourselves properly and then being willing to do that is what's going to help us create a new health future moving forward. Okay? This is a little bit of review, but we've talked about this several times, but again, this is a new idea, right? This idea that there are different phases to our health journey. We start out in this phase. This is the phase we're trying to get away from. We're trying to end, right? We're trying to change. We're trying to do something different. Phase 1 is weight loss. I know this image is not real good. Sorry about that. Weight loss is phase 1. When I talk to people, I actually have a handful of clients. I can't even get a hold of them. They don't answer my phone calls. I can't coach them. I know that they're not reading this. All they're doing is the program. And here's the problem. I know that they are not going to be prepared when they get to the end of that. They're thinking that this is a program, right? Just do the 5 and 1. Woohoo! We're going to lose weight. And they think that it ends there. But the truth is, once we've lost our weight, we want to transition to this kind of getting set in a pattern of healthy weight. And then we actually want to begin this optimization. Now, this is where we begin to put in exercise. This is where we begin to really work on our sleep and energy management habits. This is where we're really working on the things that hone our health. Again, everybody gets to choose how many steps they're willing to take. I'm not going to push anybody, but I will encourage. And then phase 4 is longevity. And this is about really even into our later years. So being able to live this out 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 15 years from now. So this is a new lifestyle. This is just the way we are. And we all know somebody that lives that way. Usually just one or two. That they're just healthy people. We call them health nuts, right? But who's really nuts at the end of the day? Let's be serious, right? They're the ones that got their heads screwed on straight. And the rest of us, we're just floating along down the river on our way to old age and obesity and immobility and all of those kinds of things. So what we're going to talk about tonight is mainly phase 2, and what do we do when we get to phase 2? How do we know when we're done with phase 1, and what do we do when we get to phase 2 so that we can make that transition into the next phases, all right? So phase 2 is when we get to our healthy weight. This is different for everybody, and I think it's really important that all of us understand that. Now, there are some benchmarks that can be really helpful. There's the BMI. I know that a lot of people think that the BMI is just crazy. When I started this, I thought getting to my BMI weight to a healthy, which would be about a BMI of less than 25, I thought that was crazy. I didn't even think it was possible. Now I'm like, no, it's pretty legit. And the BMI, as they've devised it over the years, is very scientific. It's used in almost every medical field as an ideal weight range. It is based on the studies that they've done to determine what is a safe weight based on a person's height for minimizing risks for diseases and other problems. So, as a coach, I'm not going to say you got to get to your ideal BMI or under 25, but I am going to encourage you to really think about it and consider it, because there's scientific evidence that being in that weight range reduces our risk for disease significantly. As far as body fat percentage, that's another way to kind of measure where we're at. Body fat percentage, ideally for men, should be 18%. For women, should be 25%. So that's another kind of target that we can look at and say, maybe that's what I kind of need to aim for, all right? And then the waist circumference. This one seems a little bit strange to me because based on your height, it could be very different. But for men, it should be 37 or below, and for women, 31.5. And again, that's measuring right across here, okay? Now, those are guidelines set by other people.
I said Barbie.
What's that?
Barbie.
Those are guidelines set by other people, right? Those are things that we can consider, we can think about. But we also, each one of us, we've lived our life up to this point, and usually when I talk to people, they can tell me when they really felt good, when they felt healthy, when they felt good about the weight that they were at. Not just, I was skinny then, but I felt healthy and I felt good about that weight. So obviously we want to take that into consideration as well, okay? So part of this is determining that, and I know for a lot of people we set one goal, a goal that we really feel is achievable, and then when we get closer to that goal, we can say, maybe I want to nudge my goal a little bit further than what I thought I could have done before, okay? So I want to encourage you to keep your mind open. Some of these things that we think, and again, at 52, I wouldn't have even begun to imagine that I could hit 150 pounds again. I mean, it was just out of my mind. And yet here, I've been able to do that, and I actually feel really good at this weight. So keep your mind open. Don't get overwhelmed by the goal, but don't count it out either. And I also encourage you not to just settle for healthier. Sometimes we allow the goal of good to get in the way of great. And sometimes it's because we don't even want to think beyond that. But, so we need to set that goal, and then we need to be prepared once we get to that goal based on these to determine whether or not we want to nudge that a little bit more or whether or not that's where we want to stay. As your coach, I want to coach you to where you feel most comfortable, and that's kind of the standard that I'm looking for. So, the first thing we have to do is we have to prepare our mind for a successful transition. Part of that is keeping in contact with your coach. Again, I've got some clients who I can't get a hold. I text them, and I don't know. Maybe they're not doing so well and they don't want to talk to me. I don't know. But when they get to that point, my concern is, if they get to that point, they're gonna really have a hard time transitioning. I wanna be there to help walk you through it. Knowing your goal, we just talked about that. The next thing is knowing your activity level. That's gonna be part of the formula that we use to figure out what your fueling is gonna look like as you transition, all right? And then what we're gonna talk about is making the transition a plan. So actually putting into place in detail which things you're gonna be doing. As it says here with the asterisk, transition from optimal weight 5-in-1 plan requires fuelings for 4 to 6 weeks. Clients can continue to use fuelings based on personal preference. What that means is when you get to your target weight, the transition period is actually about 6 weeks long. The reason for that is because we want to reestablish that new baseline that our body is used to. Remember, our body likes to find rhythms and patterns and likes to settle into places. And so it'll take 6 weeks for that transition to take place. So you'll still need some fuelings. And then after that, clients can continue to use fuelings based on personal preference. Some people want to get off program altogether, off the program food and everything else. But part of what we're doing is we're changing the way, we're not eating 2 or 3 big meals a day anymore. We're still doing the 6 small meals. And I personally use the fuelings because they work. They fill that void. They provide exactly what I need. Things that I could get through Whole Foods, but it's much more complicated. Honestly, it's just simpler. So we want to make both of those options available to people. You could continue to use program foods, or you can get off of those completely. So the 2 main steps in this strategy is determining your total energy expenditure, your TEE. So what we want to do is we want to find out what you need on a daily basis to maintain your weight, to keep the weight now that you've lost it, right? So TEE is adding calories until we reach our body's set weight point, so that there's an equal point. Calories in, calories out. We're no longer storing calories as fat. Now we're using the calories that we take in each day, and we're just keeping that going. Number 2, your transition eating plan, the 6-week plan that gradually increases your calorie intake and reintroduces a wider variety of foods. And that's the part that we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes that you were asking about. So what does that actually look like? When do I add what? And how do I incorporate those things in a strategy that'll work? So our TEE is determined by our basal metabolic rate. So your basal metabolic rate is basically how many calories your body uses just to do things like think,
When you're rushing.
heartbeat, yes. Yeah, you're
Right.
resting, what your body just uses on a daily basis, right? So added to that is our physical activity level. So some people are gonna use, in this department, more than others, depending on what their exercise looks like, right? And then there's the thermic effect of the food you eat. Actually, metabolizing food takes energy, right? So we want to take all 3 of these things into consideration as we're figuring out how many calories we actually need to have in our diet on a daily basis. So here's how we calculate this. Here, I'm going to invite you guys to do this. I'm going to invite you to take out your phones, because most phones have a calculator on them. You guys have one on your phone? Oh, my phone is there. I can't even do this. So, if your phone has a calculator, go ahead and open that up. Now, what I'm going to encourage you to do, instead of your current weight, because this is talking about like after you've reached your goal weight, right? I want you to put in what your goal weight is. All right? Times 11 calories. So my goal weight was actually 155 times 11. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I can't remember, but so that's your TEE. Then you want to factor in your activity level, your current activity level. If right now you're doing you're walking for a half an hour a day, I would say that is light exercise. If you're working out and you're actually going to the gym and for an hour you're hitting it pretty hard, I would consider that moderate exercise if you're doing that on a regular basis, 5 to 7 times a
Thing
week.
is, I mean, like right now, we've lost a little bit and already our activity's going up. I
Right.
don't have a clue what I might be able to do if I lose what I wanna lose.
Yeah, and we're just doing this for a, just a stab in the dark kind of a thing right now. But what do you imagine yourself doing? This would be for heavy exercise. This is somebody who's building muscle, who's training for a marathon, who's, really doing some heavy exercise. So we're gonna take our TEE times 1.2, 1.5, or 1.7. And that's gonna give us our total TEE, which is our transition daily calorie intake. Okay?
Is that all in this book?
Yes, actually, I'm really glad that you asked, because all of this, everything that I'm teaching, all the
Is
stuff
all
that we
in the
do
book? Good.
is in that life book. As a matter of fact, this stuff
Oh, there it
is
is, yep, I see, okay.
element 14, and it walks you through it. Part of the reason that I do this, Lois,
Guys can probably different. Guys are different than girls. right?
yeah. Anybody wanna tell me how many calories their TE is?
Coming out with 3,000.
3,000? Now, did you use your current weight or your goal weight?
Yes.
Your goal weight, okay. And did you do the heavy exercise?
Moderate.
Moderate, okay. So,
Well, once a month, moderate exercise.
Well, that also
I
looks
won't
like
be
walking.
smoking your ass, will I?
he's gonna be doing moderate exercise every day, you just wait and
The
see.
grandkids is gonna say, we're gonna play with grandpa.
All right, anybody else wanna tell us what they're,
1950,
1950, okay, yep, that's about right.
yeah, but that's my goal weight.
Right, yep, yep,
Mine's 2640.
okay. Yep, that's about right.
1,700.
So that gives you an idea at the end of this. Now, does anybody know how many calories, if you're on the 5 and 1 and doing it correctly, do you know what your calorie intake is?
Less than 1,000.
I bet it's 1,000.
Yeah, it's about 900, right? So the next thing we do is we say, okay, if you're, well, let's use Lois's because that's the easier one numbers wise. You said 1950. So if you're currently taking in about 900, then how many calories are you gonna have to increase in order to get to your TEE?
900, 700, right?
1,050. So you're gonna actually more than
Oh,
double.
yeah, you're right. I was going with her, so she said 16. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So you're actually gonna more than double your current caloric intake in order to maintain, right? Right now, we're really low, that's why we're losing weight. Once we bring it back up, then that's gonna be our maintenance. All right? What's that?
So you give me the green light to double?
Yeah, well, but
Oh,
that's,
more exercise,
but that's
right?
why we have a
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
Because if you just slam right back into that and you're doing it with
I did
donuts,
hear that.
you're in
Way too
trouble.
much.
You're in trouble, right?
Yep.
That's it, just sound good, right, there you go. It
So
doesn't
you can
sound good
eat
right now, really.
Okay, so that's how we figure out where we're gonna end up, where we're gonna go to. Again, it's gonna take us 6 weeks, and there's a plan to do that. We're not just gonna like go, I think this donut's what, about 500 calories? Boom, I'm on that. Yeah, you're gonna crash and burn real quick. Okay, so this is your transition eating plan. Again, this image is terrible, so I'm gonna tell you what it says. And again, it's in your book. All of this stuff, actually this image is in your little spiral bound notebook too, right? So what we're gonna do is week 1, we're gonna add 1 cup, a serving of vegetables of any kind. Remember during the plan, we're not eating corn, we're not eating potatoes, we're not eating carrots, things like that. In week 1 of transition, we add in a cup of those kinds of things. So now we're adding in some of those vegetables that we had been avoiding. In week 2, we add 2 medium-sized pieces of fruit, in addition to the cup of vegetables. So we've got the cup of vegetables we added last week, and now we're also adding some fruit. And for some people, that is a hallelujah moment.
No kidding.
When I could eat blueberries again,
Yeah, that's right.
I was
Eat a
like,
banana.
yeah, baby. Okay, week 3, now we added the vegetables, then we added the fruit, and now we're gonna add a cup of low-fat or fat-free dairy. Now, there are some recipes that are using dairy, even for the 5-in-1, but this is an addition to that, so this would be drinking a cup of skim milk or something like that, okay?
So is that's along with the cup previously that we could have had,
Yep.
being, almond milk or?
Yeah. Yep, the condiments. Yep, absolutely. So then week 4 to 6, we've added in the cup of vegetables, we've added in the fruit, we've added in the dairy, and now we're gonna add lean meat, more lean meat and actually grains. We're gonna add in grains at that point.
And that's week 4.
Weeks 4, 5, and 6. Mhm. Yep.
That's one time per day. What is every day
Just throughout the day.
throughout the day?
Throughout the day, yep, at whatever point. So you may, and it actually gives an example of how you might do that. So you might do your fueling in the morning, and then do your fueling and an apple mid-morning, right? And then at lunchtime, maybe you're doing a fueling and adding, some cottage cheese or some kind of dairy or whatever, depending on which week you're on. So you're kind of figuring it into your day. And I have down here to look at pages 277 and 278. Okay, yeah. There's a lot more detail in your life book. And so obviously, you guys don't need to go and scour that right now. You're not quite ready for transition. But when you get there, you're really gonna wanna spend some time looking through this and processing all of this, because it's gonna help you to have that plan. So Anita, I know what you're thinking, or some of what you're thinking is, okay, we add all this in, if we don't do it quite right, it's pretty clear in here. And it gives you examples of how you can add those things in so that you can transition effectively.
So they're not even suggesting that you can go straight to regular food and no fuelings? They're not even.
Well, that's over time. So right by the time you get to the end of this, right? Now you're looking at, what is my daily caloric intake? What do I need to get to? And at that point, you're looking at, I've got all this healthy food that I've added in. I want to make sure I'm getting the right number of calories. And if you want to do some of that with your Optavia fuelings, you can. Or if you want to be done with those and not use those at all, you can do that as well. Okay?
Oh, at the point where you're done with this?
Yeah. Yep. After you've made that transition, then we begin to lean you off of the Optavia fuelings as well. Okay? So, again, part of what makes people nervous is they love the structure of the 5-in-1 plan, but remember, there's a whole lot more to this program than the 5-in-1 plan. So the things that you're going to continue to do, or a lot of the patterns that are going to remain the same, you're going to continue to keep in contact with your coach. You're going to continue to keep in contact with this community. Fueling 6 times a day is still the plan. That will be for the rest of your life if you decide to follow this. The idea is we never want to go back to the place of eating 2 or 3 big meals a day. We want to continue this new pattern of fueling 6 times a day. We want to keep reading our life book and working on installing new habits, community Zooms, really learning what good nutrition is. We're going to talk about some of those components in a few minutes here. Water intake, movement, the 4 components, the 6 macro habits, all of these things that we're talking about are things that you're going to continue to do. Now you're just introducing whole foods and transitioning your diet back to that, right? So we've got to be careful about our mindset though. We have to remember, because the first thing we're going to want to do is say, I remember when I used to eat this much food, and your mindset is going to want to go back to the same place. Remember, we, unfortunately, as a culture, we eat for pleasure when we really need to be eating for fuel. We can enjoy food as pleasure once in a while. It's not gonna hurt us. Once a week, twice a week, to enjoy some food for pleasure. But it will definitely hurt us if we return to this place where every time I feel an urge, I go to the refrigerator and go, what do I want? We've got to continue to have a plan because we're fueling our body, not just trying to please it.
And I'm hoping that I can talk myself into, because in other words, it's just a bad habit, or it's just something that I maybe like to do. I like to eat,
Yeah.
but I also like to go out and play. I also like to do this. I also like to do this. And that one thing has stopped me from doing 10 things. And if I could just stop doing one, yeah, you know, but I say that, but
Yeah.
Good way to
Doing
look at
this.
it.
It's,
That is a good way to
Yeah.
look at it.
yeah.
You know, 'cause
Yeah.
you can't do the stuff you wanna do. I can't. I'm way over.
And at the end of the day, I mean, there's some people in really, really serious health conditions. I mean, their life is desperately limited because of obesity and what it's doing to their bodies. So we really wanna get to that place where that's not an issue for us. That's not something that's a threat to us. And we live in a dangerous world. There's all kinds of other threats too. But that's the one we've got a lot of control over. I don't want my appetites to be controlling me to the point that they're putting me in jeopardy and in danger. Yeah, I was gonna say, you look like you got a question.
Yeah, so as we're in this phase 1 weight loss, is it good to get a gym membership and start doing a lot of exercise? Or
We
is
talked a couple of weeks ago about that. It's good after you're in about a month to increase your exercise a little bit. Now, while you're on the 5 and 1, we still want to keep it in that lower range. We don't want to do a lot of intense exercise
Okay.
unless you decide to go to the 4, 2, and 1. That's not a fat burn plan, but it gives you enough calories that you can do more exercise and you'll still lose weight. So ultimately, we want to add about 100 calories a week until we get to our TEE, because again, you don't want to just boom, just slam it forward. You want to, a little bit here, a little bit there, add up till you get to that. You also want to expect weight fluctuation, so don't get freaked out if your weight goes up 3 pounds, in a couple of days. It's part of your body's adjustment process, but we do want to weigh ourselves regularly because that's going to give us some clues on what's working and what's not working and what things are going to move us. So we want to be careful about that. And then this is where we're going to address, Lynn, what you were talking about, the fact that not all foods are created equal, not all calories are created equal. So as we are adding foods, we've got some really important choices to make about how we're going to fuel our body on a daily basis. Do we want to be putting foods in that are going to, and one of the things that Dr. A says that I've seen in the book several times over, and this is making more sense to me as we go forward, is that he says one of the worst things that we do is we raise our insulin levels. When we get our insulin pump going, insulin is there because it'll protect our body. It's there to protect our body from high sugar. But when we are producing a lot of insulin, there's a negative effect to the insulin being in our system as well. And so we want to avoid things that are going to increase the insulin. What increases insulin? First of all, large amounts of food, right? Because in large amounts of food are large amounts of calories and ultimately large amounts of carbohydrate, which turn into glucose, and now your body has to fight that. That's part of why we level things out instead of having big meals and doing this. So he says we want to make sure that whatever we're eating in amounts and types of food, we're keeping our insulin levels down. So he shows us that there's some things, there's some examples. So we'll look at the way that not all vegetables are created equal. This is the GI scale, the glucose index. There's a couple of examples of this in your life book, but this is where the Habits of Health book comes in. This is the other book. This is the one that weighs like 48 pounds. I could drop this on the ground right now and probably crack the concrete. But there's a lot of really great information in here. And when you get to these kinds of things, because this is the part where we say, okay, I really, really want to get this right. I put some, as a matter of fact, if you're taking notes, I could give you some pages to go to. I'll do that in a few minutes. But there's some places where you can go and you can learn about the glucose index and the qualities and the types of food. And so that's really important. And here's some examples. Vegetables, and part of the reason that we were avoiding corn and beets and carrots. Now here's an interesting thing. Cooked carrots have an 80 on the glucose index, whereas raw carrots have a 30. Something happens in the cooking process and raises the glucose index. All of these over here are 15 or less on the glucose index. Zucchini, spinach, peppers, onions, mushrooms, all of these kinds of things. That's why all of these things are on our plan. They're all very low on the glucose index, okay? Same thing with fruits. All right, here's how our fruits all lay out. And I was bummed out to find out that blueberries are in the higher glucose
bananas.
index. But what's interesting is that we know that the blueberries are full of nutrients, right? So that might be, that might be one you want to have some blueberries because they're worth the trade. Those are not empty calories. Whereas watermelon would be empty calories. Watermelon's very high in the glucose index and it tastes yummy. That's why I can eat like a whole watermelon. But I looked at this and I was like, oh boy. Now I know what I was doing to myself when I was eating the whole
Well, we
watermelon.
thought we were eating healthy.
And those are all empty calories.
Right.
As you move forward, and you don't have to become a nutritionist or anything like that, but you're going to want to protect the progress that you've made, and you're going to want to keep these things in mind. As you're adding new foods, keep in mind the order. Week 1, we can add in some vegetables that we hadn't been eating. Week 2, some fruits. Week 3, some non-fat or low-fat dairy that's not on the list. And then week 4 through 6, we can begin adding some grains and some other starchy kind of vegetables. And so we'll follow that, adding about 100 calories a week until we get up to our TEE. But even then, we don't want to be filling our TEE with empty junk food. We want to be doing it with foods that are going to be adding to our overall health picture.